Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another thrilling episode of Views on Vue. I am Steve Edwards, the host with the face for radio and the voice for being a mime, but I'm still your host. Today, I'm flying solo on the panel, and with me, I have a name that is well known in the Vue training community, Adam Jahr of Vue Mastery. How you doing, Adam?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
You sure? With that cough there, I wasn't sure if you were
Right.
doing well or not.
I had just taken a sip of hot coffee, so we're caffeinated and we're good.
Coffee-nated, I like that. That's good. And then also before we move on any further, I'd like to welcome in our studio audience. Okay, thank you, audience. It's always nice to have them. They don't make a lot of sound endearing, but it's the moral support I know that I appreciate when I'm recording these podcasts.
Big crowd today.
Huge. So, as I mentioned, Adam Jahr is well known in the Vue community for his Vue Mastery and the training that he provides there with Greg Pollock. And so, as I've mentioned in previous episodes recently, it was released back in April or May, if I remember, I did a very basic course on Nux 3, just getting up and going with Nux 3. I think it was called Intro to Nux 3, or I forget what it was titled now that I think about it.
Nux 3 Essentials.
No, there you go. It was an essential course. Thank you. And so I worked quite a bit with Adam and his crew on the creation of that video, of that course. And so I thought I'd bring Adam on to just to talk about that and what's involved in what he does and how he does it, because they make some really awesome videos. Now, in the past, we've had Greg Pollock, his partner in crime, on here, and I will put links to that episode in the show notes. Greg, to this day, I still say Greg has the smoothest voice of anybody I've heard in a training video. It's like butter.
Yeah, definitely a voice. Definitely a voice for radio for sure.
Yes, exactly. Yes, unlike mine. But anyway, so before we get going and into all of Vue Mastery, why don't you give us some background on yourself, Adam, who you are, why you're famous, what your development and training history is, and then we'll delve into the nitty-gritty.
Sure. So I'm Adam Jahr. I am the co-founder of Vue Mastery. So we strive to be the ultimate learning resource for Vue developers, providing them really everything they need to succeed in their field, whether they're seeking to level up their career, maybe they're seeking a promotion, or maybe they're coming from either vanilla JavaScript, fresh out of code school, something like that, and they're looking for a streamlined way to get up to a professional level of Vue skills, and that's what our platform provides for people. And so my background is in education training. We've had this company, we started up in 2017 and have been growing it and building up the platform ever since. And before that, I was a part of an in-person coding boot camp. So had a lot of kind of on-the-ground experience seeing people going from really zero to hero, so to speak, where maybe they're in the service industry or in education or wherever their background was. We took them from that place of pretty much knowing nothing about programming and getting them up to the point that they could be hireable as a junior level developer. So that was a really key part of my experience professionally, of really seeing what it takes to educate people, kind of seeing where people's maybe roadblocks are, the common areas that people have confusion around. And so I always apply that empathy to not make assumptions about what people may or may not know, and kind of have that as a common denominator whenever I'm producing content in the back of my head, especially the really fundamental, essential content, with keeping that experience in mind. So that's kind of where I come from, and where we're going is we're continuing to make the platform of benefit to the existing subscribers and anyone else who decides to join us in the months and years to come. Always producing content on really the latest topics. For example, when Vuex switched over to become Pinia, we started producing Pinia content right away, and we do that really with anything. So that's where we're at.
So you went into detail there about your training background and how much you've done training, and your education and so on. How much of a developer background do you have? Have you like worked for an agency or done side projects or worked for large companies, or do you, what's that like?
So yeah, so I've done some like freelancing work, but I've actually never worked for a company as a developer beyond the development work that I've done for like within the roles of my education profession. So in other words, I've built things that were necessary within those roles in terms of web apps, and also built every web app for the courses that we've built. But my experience really starts and hones in on the education part of it, and really developing that refined approach to creating content that is simple to digest, but also gets you there quicker. What I found is that a lot of people think that producing a lot of content is the kind of key to success, and that's part of it, but the bigger part is producing the right kind of content that gets people to their end goals as quickly and smoothly as possible. And I think that's kind of the secret sauce that we're probably going to touch on and unpack here in this episode of kind of how to bake that cake. But yeah, that's been really my focus throughout my career, is to create the highest quality content that gets people to their professional goals as simply and swiftly as possible.
Yeah, well, I suppose that's true for any business, right? If you're making stuff that nobody wants, then you're not going to really be very successful. Whether you're selling goods or services or training or whatever, that's for sure. Now, I know that, side note, you and Greg used to do the Vue News podcast. It was a little, 5-10 minute, roundup of news. Because I know I used to listen to it all the time. You quit doing that a while ago, am I right?
Yeah, we quit a number of years ago. But when we first started, so we did it for a couple of years. It was a weekly podcast where we really did a kind of a roll up of the week's biggest news in the Vue community. So we focused on maybe updates to libraries and plugins, new releases. We also focused on different articles and kind of approaches and best practices that we were noticing, and kind of summed that all up in about 5 to 10 minutes each week. Over time, we did stop doing that, and we focused a little more on the blog content and the video content. We found that was of more value to the community ultimately. Right.
So one of the questions I always have, and this isn't a long topic, is just business models of people like this. So, you get places like, say, a Udemy or something where you can buy courses as a one-off versus subscription services. So Vue Mastery is like a subscription, right? You pay a monthly or yearly fee, and then you have access to all the content
exactly,
as it becomes available, right?
Yep, we've got 3 different subscription plans. So we have monthly, we have annual, and then we have also teams. So we have a lot of companies who either are using Vue or starting to use Vue or contemplating using Vue, who come on as a team. So we're a recurring revenue subscription-based learning platform.
But at the same time, not everything is locked behind a paywall. I know, so for instance, you'll put some stuff on YouTube, right? Like a teaser, a first episode for a course, or even make them available, the intro ones available on your platform for someone to see, right? Sort of entice them and say, hey, this looks interesting. I want to pony up and get a membership here.
Yeah, so we definitely have a bunch of free content, and the reason behind that is twofold. One, it's great content, not to pat ourselves too hardly on the back, but we want to share the work that we're doing, and especially with that intro content. So a lot of our intro courses, and also the first 2 lessons of every course, regardless of if it's fundamentals or advanced, they're all free for people to consume, and that has always been true and will always be true. So whether that is stuff that we repost over on YouTube, or if it's internally on our platform over at vuemastery.com, you can watch all of the initial 2 lessons of the course for free. So point 1 is we just like to get our brand out there, get our content out there, give people especially with that intro content. We have our Intro to Vue 3 course is fully free. We like to give people that starting place for free. And then if you want to commit beyond that, of course, that functions as an enticement, as you say, into becoming a paid subscriber. If the way that we teach resonates with the way that you learn, if you're into high quality video content, if you appreciate maybe visual animations that help reinforce concepts, that's really our approach. And again, we do so in a more succinct way, so you still get the same value as you might in a kind of more longer drawn out video that you'd find somewhere else, but the quality and the edit and the pre-planning is done in such a way that you can get that same value in much shorter time.
So I've noticed on your site that you also, and I've seen this when I've searched, is you also have Vue conference videos like Vue Comp, Connect.tech. Are these, do you guys have, I don't think you have like sole license to publish these because these are all also on YouTube. Is that correct, or am I mistaken?
So I think it would depend on the specific conference. So we have since 2018, over the years, amassed a collection of conference videos. So I think we're actually the biggest collection of Vue conference videos on the internet. So you can find that all on the conference tab of vuemastery.com. But we have essentially accumulated those by becoming sponsors over the years of those conferences. And so we essentially become the video sponsor of conference XYZ. We do a lot of work with VueConf US, and we go to Vue Amsterdam, and you mentioned Connect Tech, and we go to Vue Toronto. So we definitely have a number of those conference talks, and we do republish them over on YouTube as well, to share the knowledge, really.
So they're not part of a subscription. They're just available to anybody who comes to the site then?
Yeah, none of them are behind a paywall, so you wouldn't have to have a paid subscription to watch them. Of course, if you have a paid subscription, that is part of the platform, but you could watch them entirely for free.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about the growth of your organization. So you and Greg were the initial partners. Is that how it started out?
Yep, exactly. So it definitely started out with he and I, and we started out with, so for people who might not know who Greg is or what his history is, he started codeschool.com back in the day and built that up to be the best place to learn a bunch of different programming languages. And I think how he would describe it is like the best way to start learning programming language X, whether that's, Python or Ruby or whatnot. He actually has a big history in Ruby on Rails, creating the Rails for Zombies course, which I actually have come across a number of courses over the years now that's like taking that same model. I was just looking at a smart contract course. I think it was a Solidity course, Solidity for zombies. But he's had quite the impact on the tech education space, and so we took everything he learned and we wanted to apply that into a new learning platform and kind of combine forces, and me bring kind of my in-person coding boot camp experience to the table. And we looked at a number of emerging technologies, and again, this was 2017 at the time, so we were comparing kind of metrics of a number of them, and at the end of the day, Vue seemed like the best choice, and that's essentially the horse that we bet on, so to speak, and it's turned out to be a winner. It's only continued to grow over the years, and not only grow in terms of its adoption and popularity, but also the ecosystem and the strength and quality of the libraries within it. And so we're very happy with the choice that we made, and are full devotees to the Vue ecosystem.
So side note, being the geek that I am, I'm just curious, what platform is your site built on? What do you use for backend? I dare ask, is it Vue on the front end?
It is Vue, and it's specifically Nux that we're using. And on the back end, we're using Firebase is our back end.
Oh, okay. All right. So then, so you started out obviously with the two of you, and then as you've grown along, obviously you people like me came in, you've got people doing courses from you. How was that growth? How did that happen? Was it fast? Did it take a while before you finally got some traction and then people started coming? Because you obviously have, courses from Evan Yu, who knows a thing or two about Vue.
Yeah.
And some other core people, I believe. So how does that all work? Or how did that grow? And then how does it work now?
Yeah, so at the beginning, it was Greg and myself producing the content, whether we were producing our own courses or teaming up to do a course together. And then as we continued to build the brand and build our audience, we got, more and more eyes on our content, and we also got interest in other creators or people who wanted to start partnering with us, who, you mentioned Evan. Earlier on, we also partnered with some core team members like Damien Dulish. And so that was kind of an incremental process of as we built the brand online, as we built our social platforms, as we attended in-person conferences, we just started to build that network and find interesting people who had stuff to offer our subscribers. And whether we partnered with, for example, Ben Hong was one of our earlier instructors, and with him we taught him our entire process. And so he's very independent in terms of producing content, and has taken our process and put his spin on it, and he's creating some of my favorite content on the platform. And so there's people like that who we kind of said, here's this week-long training, a boot camp, so to speak, on how what is the Vue Mastery way of producing content, and have partnered with him and people like him ever since. And then there's other aspects where we kind of plug into experts, like, for example, when we do content with Evan, it's not like we're asking him to build animation sequences like we would internally. We might layer that on top of what he is doing, but we focus his time on providing his expertise in the best, most fluid way that he knows how, and we kind of add our secret sauce on top of that.
Right. So, just by way of backstory, the way I came to work for you was through a post on Vue Jobs.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I happened to be looking one day. It's not something I look at every day, but I happened to look and I said, "Oh, that sounds interesting." And so I have done some conference talks and stuff before, but hadn't really done any video training. Mm-hmm. And so, if I remember correctly, you asked us to send you a demo video.
Yep.
And so I whipped up something with MonoSnap, and I still have the project saved, I think, where I created a quick Vue front end that queried the dad joke API. I think it's called ICANN dad joke, mm-hmm. and displayed a random dad joke. But which you were more interested in wasn't the finished product as much as how I taught, right? And how I explain things. And so the email I got from you was, "Hey, you seem like a quote unquote natural explainer." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. I like that."
Yeah.
And we went from there. And for me, that's something I've always been pretty good at is taking a fuzzy topic and breaking it down into details so that people can understand it. But I was curious, did you get many other people through that Vue Jobs posting, or has it mostly been just sort of a word of mouth networking type of thing?
Yeah, so I did get a number of responses. You were actually the one person that was chosen to make the course, so kudos to you. And yeah, so what? It's funny that you remember my specific feedback to you, but that was true. It was what I look for when I look in, whether it's for a blog writer or an actual full course creator, is someone who is at the core an explainer, who goes step by step, who has that empathy and really has the heart and mind to be an educator. And I think maybe some people think, oh, I'm a really great developer, I should start producing content, and then they'll produce content that makes a bunch of assumptions and doesn't really address incrementally how to do something, and maybe shows the how but not the why. And I think that's the biggest error that people make when they produce content, is they'll say, okay, well, repeat after me, and then you watch the video and you said, well, I repeat it after you, but now I'm kind of helpless unless I need to do this exact same situation. I don't, it's the old idiom of you can, you can give a man a fish or you can teach a man to fish. And that's really what true education is about, obviously. And that is best accomplished when you interweave the how with the why, so that you can make people independent and self-sufficient when they finish your videos, and they can apply that and map that over to their use cases. And so that's what I identified in you. I identified that core explainer aspect of you, and it's probably something you've developed over years of, whether it's like mentoring people in your work role or hours of podcasting and using your voice in a way to explain things in a simplified and streamlined way. And and also I appreciated your use case with the dad jokes and the humor that you and personality that you infused into your application video.
Yeah, that was fun. We'll get to that in a second. But I guess the analogy that I think of, you were talking about someone being a good developer versus being a good trainer, is I often think of the professional athlete who retires and decides to become a coach. And more often than not, they fail than succeed. The sports landscape is littered with former athletes who became coaches and just failed because they were great as a player, but not as someone who can teach and train other people. So yeah, it's definitely it's an intrinsic characteristic. It's hard to teach somebody how to teach.
Yeah,
there's some things you can teach and there's some things you can't, for sure.
Yeah,
and it's interesting. My daughter is in her last year of getting her education degree to be a primary school teacher, and so, as I watch her and the coursework that she goes through and the things that she learns how to incorporate into her classroom and her teaching, that's part of it. But if she didn't have the personality that she does, which really inspires kids and, makes things fun for them, then she wouldn't be a good teacher. She could have all the information, but if she can't convey it in a way that makes people interested, then the good information doesn't really matter a hill of beans.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of why I mentioned the personality aspect that I appreciated about your application video, and said, like, you got to have both the heart and the mind, meaning like the personality, the empathy, all of that, and also the technical skills, and also understand kind of the mechanics of how to produce content that is effective and doesn't just waste people's time and leaves them with a fish they can eat, but no fishing pole. Right.
Yeah. I like to train, but and I've done it in various places, whether it's been in the tech world, software, whether it's been, back to my early software days where I would travel around to customers and teach them how to use our software that I'd helped develop, or once I became a developer, or even in the fire service, I was training other, volunteer firefighters on different things. I'm not the kind of person that could be just a full-time trainer where I go out and I learn something so that I can teach other people. What I prefer to do is, it's more like, okay, I've been using this for a while. I'm familiar with it. I know how this is cool. Now I want to show other people how to do the same thing. And so I'll go off and do some training, but not like I just couldn't do the full-time, I'm a professional trainer. That's not my thing. For sure. So the next thing I wanted to delve into is Vue Mastery videos and how much different they are than almost any other software training course you teach that is out there. Whether you look at Maximilian Schwartzmiller or some of those other trainers on Udemy, whether you watch Jeffrey Way at Laracast, whether you watch, my buddy Eric Hanchett and all the video he does on Program with Eric, almost all of them, it's always not as structured, shall we say. It's basically they're recording their screen and they have their code editor. And then maybe they'll flip over and show you the browser and the effects. And then you'll have maybe it's a database tool if you're looking at your data, whether it's Mongo or SQL or something like that. As compared to the Vue Mastery stuff where you've got effects and sliding in and highlighting code and it's very professionally done. It looks very professional. and makes it easy to follow along so you can see what they're doing, along with, interspersing the teacher being on camera and so
Yeah.
on. And so before we get into some of that nitty-gritty, and I can share some of my experiences, was that a decision made from the very beginning that we want to be visibly different than all the other Vue training courses? Was that just something that sort of developed as you went along? Or how did you get to that point where like, okay, we want to do this in this way that's very different from
Yeah.
everybody else?
Yeah, I mean that's an excellent question, and it really boils down to the why for why Greg and I started this project together. Because he again came from code school, and those are very highly produced, highly polished videos, and he had all that experience producing high quality learning content from that. And then for me, I was um, again seeing the ways in which people were struggling in person, especially learning this all from scratch, and I was producing live presentations that were kind of the live version of the code school type course. And so we kind of took our two approaches and combined it, and that's really the Vue Mastery approach. And so you mentioned, the high level of production that's involved, and to really summarize it, it's about making abstract concepts concrete so you can visually see what we're talking about. And that not only helps you grok the new concept as you're learning it, but it gives us kind of iconography and symbols that we can reintroduce throughout the course to remind you and reinforce that same analogy. So it, like, over the duration of the course, you're getting this really clear kind of visual analogy for the technology that you're working with. We're not just simply staring at code and explaining how it works. We're literally showing you how it works with these detailed in motion animations. So we highly focus on the animations. Also, it's really important to us that we have a nice balance of you seeing the instructor when you need to and not seeing them when you don't need to, meaning often it's better to just see the code and not have like a face blocking some bits. I'm sure we can all empathize with watching a video maybe on YouTube and you're like,
Yes.
but I can't see this last part of the line because you didn't move where your face was. So little things like that, of course, we avoid. But also it's really important for us to bring the instructor on. So like, maybe you need to go deeper or say a caveat, or, you might think this, but it's actually this. So those moments are really great to bring the instructor on and to kind of take a pause, do a kind of pulse check on where we're at in the concept, in the lesson. And additionally, screencasting is a huge, huge component. Instead of just hitting record and recording the whole aspect of us building something from start to finish, we really pre-plan and parcel out these like incremental snippets, and this allows us to be very intentional about the order in which we're teaching, and sometimes we'll reorder things prior to the kind of final filming to make it as smooth and incremental as possible. And we're also utilizing the features within the screencasting program that we use to I describe it as we're isolating focus, and we're saying, okay, so we have a limited amount of time with this person, and we've got their entire screen, and we need to show them where to look when. And so how we achieve that is we might say like, okay, so you see this line of code here, and then we blur everything but that line of code. And you see how this, maybe it's like passing a parameter over to here, and then we draw a line and highlight that other line of code. So we're very intentional, very specific about isolating that focus exactly where it needs to be. So you're not just kind of pointing with your words, but you're giving the viewer really no choice but to look exactly where they need to look, and that lightens the kind of cognitive load of the learner, so that they're just absorbing exactly what you need to have them absorb. And then of course you layer on top those animations and those symbols, and it just helps get, again, like I started the conversation, get them where you want to be quicker and more simply. Again, obviously creating the content is not simple at all, but the outcome in terms of receiving that content is a much more simplified and succinct way to learn, we found.
Right. So I guess what we can talk about through the lens of how the process that I went through is what I sort of like to get out there is the amount of detail and planning that went into this. So because you're screencasting and then you have to come back and you have to, do your highlights and moves and stuff like that, I basically scripted out everything.
Yep.
In Notion. We decided, you and I sat down and decided, okay, so we want to try to keep it to so many episodes, no more than so many minutes long, because if you get in episodes that are too long, then you lose interest, right? And then they start to get bored, or maybe you're distracted. And so you want to do it long enough to get the information across, but not too long so that you bore them.
Yep.
And so we used Notion and went in and broke it down in episodes, and I scripted out, okay, I want to say this and this and this. And I was, I had thought, okay, this is sort of a general thing. I was amazed when you guys came back through and said, okay, so we're going to insert this video here and this video here, and we're going to do this highlight here. It was really incredibly precise into how we did it. Now, for those that are not into screencasting and ScreenFlow, it is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, right.
I tried and we wrestled with it, and I don't remember if it was just monitor issues on my end and shared monitors or what it was, but we finally said, okay, we're going to have somebody from Vue Mastery do this for you. You just tell us, give us the repo, and we're going to let him do it because he's really good at what he does and he can do it a heck of a lot quicker. And I was very grateful for that.
Yeah.
It took a lot of stress off me. So Andy is very good at editing and highlighting and doing all the things you need to do very quickly. So I know you'd mentioned to me maybe before, and edit, if we need to take this out, we can. So it's up to you. But you'd mentioned that maybe you would have him do some of that ScreenFlow instead of the course creator, so that the course creator can function on what they're good at and just providing the code. Is that how you've been doing things going forward?
Yeah, we have. And I think we had that initial conversation right when we first spoke on video about kind of how we were experimenting a bit with the way that we were partnering with you. And it was a bit of a trial and error period. And I think that was really the major sticking point was ScreenFlow. And it's so precise, so specific on how we use it. And it's also very tedious. I think that's probably the best word for it. And like you said, not for the faint of heart. And so, yeah, so with other people we partnered with since then, we have kept that as an in-house piece of the production process, because it's just something we've refined, and it's going to be a lot quicker, and we're going to get exactly what we had intended to keep that part of the kind of production pie in-house. So thanks for kind of being that testing ground for us.
The guinea pig, I was preferring to think of it. You mentioned trial and error.
Yeah.
I was the error. Right. So anyway, so I did that. Now, actually, I had to create the code, obviously, and create the demo app that you're building from start to scratch, from start to finish. In my case, we literally went through installing, from the command line and getting your app up and running, and then you're going to open this file and do this and change so you see this, and then we're going to create components and do our search and all that kind of stuff, and then have a repository, a GitHub repository that I could share, and then Andy went from there. So now the other part of this is the video, the actual recording, the scripting, the camera work and all that stuff, and that's where Nils comes in.
Yeah.
And Nils was the video recorder editor guy, and he was a ton of fun to work with.
Yeah.
And so what we did, I thought was interesting, was I have an iPhone, and we used my iPhone camera. And I got a little stand, and we have a little app on there, and I forget what it was called, but some sort of app that we could use to record my video. And then what we would do is we would get on Zoom. So we'd synchronize together. And then I would set up my phone and read through the script and record. Okay, you need to record up to here, and then we need to record it up to here. And obviously, we had to make sure I had to go through and check, make sure that my script matched the screen flow, because I had the screen and I could see what was going on.
Yeah.
And so he and I would sit and record, and we did it. I think we did it for 6 videos. We did 2 sessions of a couple hours each, just recording. And Nils is crazy detailed on, he's a video guy. He's not a code geek by any stretch of the imagination. He's just a video guy and recording and editing and stuff. And he's got a lot of video production background, if I remember correctly. But the amount of times that he would have me say lines over and over, maybe put more inflection on this or less inflection here, or say it in a brighter tone, or that kind of thing, was incredibly detailed. And fortunately, I just talked over and over, and then he got to go cut it apart and edit it and do all that background technical stuff. But yeah, that was crazy, the amount of work and expertise that he had to make it sound really good. You know, my voice, I always joke, you know, I have the face for radio and the voice for being a mime, because mimes are silent. Yeah. And so I really have to work to pep it up, to say things that don't sound like I'm mad at somebody, you know. Make it sounds like, make it a voice that somebody wants to listen to. And so he was really able to do a very good job about bringing that out of me, and at least I hope so, making it somewhat presentable.
Yeah, I would agree. Nils is awesome. We're actually, before working together in this project, we've been friends for years. But he is, like you said, a video guy. He has a master's in film, actually. So he's done feature-length documentaries. He's done a lot of work where he's been interviewing people live, and so he's has directing experience. So that all kind of bundles into a really nice package for hitting all the notes that we're looking for in terms of, like you said, I kind of struggle with that too. I can be a little more monotonous unless I'm like intentional with adding color and inflection and whatnot. So I'm glad that that was useful for you to have that kind of real-time direction, and to get that feedback on like, but say it again and say it a little different. And so it's important to us that people have that support when they're recording with us, so that they aren't just like speaking into the void of a camera and hoping that it's sounds good. But so it's important for us to, especially with people's first initial courses and until they get that kind of under their belt, to give them that direction and to give them that support along the way, so that we get a better final product, so that you feel highly supported, and so that you're learning things as you go to be a better kind of on-camera personality to teach more effectively. Because there's ways to use your face, use your inflection, use your almost like point with your voice, so to speak, to make things even clearer than maybe you would naturally say something. Right.
And so one of the fun things we did too, if you've watched this, you'll notice this at the end, was we sort of got to add my personality into some of this. You know, at the end of every podcast episode, I do the dad jokes, and I obviously did the dad jokes, you know, as the demo. And so at the end of every episode, there's 6 chapters or episodes, whatever we call them. We do a section on cringeworthy dad jokes, which was funny. And all I knew, I remember, all I knew was that we were adding a dad joke, and then I saw the first one and had this whole title, cringeworthy, and I messaged Adam, I was like, cringeworthy? Are they really that bad?
Well,
I said, no, that's good. That's awesome. Yeah. That's perfect. And just left
I think that's the metric of a good dad joke, if it makes you cringe.
Exactly. And I make people cringe all the time, let me tell you. But so that was fun to be able to do that. And I just picked up 6 of my more recent ones, and we threw them in there, and then they edited in, and that was that. So
yeah, I'm glad that that y'all were able to add that additional color and that element of your personality. And really at this point, it's part of your personal brand. your
Yeah,
dad
it
jokes.
is. It is for sure. Sort of funny. I get to the point where my son's girlfriend messaged me this morning with another dad joke. It's like,
Nice.
I like it when people provide them and bring them on for sure. So then after I did all the recording and stuff, then it was pretty much up to your crew to get it all packaged together and to post it on Vue Mastery and YouTube. So it was nice for me. Obviously we talked about me being the heir and figuring out, yeah, he really shouldn't do the ScreenFlow stuff. But as a creator, I can focus on what I need to do without getting stressed out about all the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking there's this one story. I don't know if you've ever listened to Dave Ramsey.
I have, yep.
He's a real, Financial Peace University. He's a real financial guru guy. And I went through his course a number of years ago. And he mentions a story about allowing people to focus on what they do. And he told a story about a friend of his who had a car dealership. And the sales weren't really where they could be. And he thought they could be doing better, but couldn't figure out what to do. So Dave went in there and, sort of checked the place out and looked around. And he said, the problem is you've got these guys that are salesmen and they're really good at sales, but they're all bogged down with paperwork and all this other administrative paperwork stuff that they're having to take this time apart to do. He says, why don't you get somebody to do that for them? Administrative assistant, whatever term or role you want to do, that takes that off so they can just focus on selling and get their sale. And he said the guy did that and his sales just went through the roof because they were able to focus on what they did best. So that was one thing I really appreciated about that, having that backing and being able to do that. Now, as I understand, I forget, there was one of your people had messaged me in Slack at one point and said, hey, we've got quite the waiting list, of people that are looking forward to this class. Now, is it true that when my course was released, it almost crashed your servers? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Almost, but we weathered the storm.
You weathered the storm. Had to ramp up a few extra servers and cloud stuff, right?
Had to send in the troops, but we got it done.
Yeah. So, and it was good for me. Part of doing that course was, when you and I first hooked up, we were trying to decide, okay, what do we want to do a course on? And I had some ideas, and you're like, no, we got people really asking for Nuxt stuff at this point in time. So we decided to go down the Nuxt route. And, they say that if you want to learn something, teach it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So,
yeah.
This was so true for me because I have done Nuxt sites and I've done a lot of Nuxt stuff in the past, but it was all version 2, version 3. And I hadn't had a chance. And I was very fortunate in that I had a resource that I could pull from a Daniel Rowe, because Daniel has been on this podcast 2 or 3 times to talk about Nuxt because he is on the Nuxt core team. And so he knows very well, how stuff works and all the intricate details. And so I pinged him a couple times on Discord and said, hey, Daniel, can we set aside some time to help me with this? And so I got his time and he helped me get things up and going. So that was a very huge help. I was very fortunate to have that to get me up and going for sure.
Yeah. Gratitude to him for lending the support, because he knows obviously the inside out of not only how things works, but like the why and what they considered, but actually did implement. So it's, always the core team members are such excellent resources. We utilize them throughout our platform. Eduardo Postfa being one of them. So whenever you can get the insight of the brilliant minds that are kind of like constructing the tools that we're using, it's always the best way to go.
Yeah, for sure. What's interesting is the time frame in which we were recording this it was still in beta. It wasn't in beta. It wasn't even, 1.0 hadn't been released. And so things could be changing. And I think in fact, I remember at one point, one of the things that changed from the time I started till we ended, and Andy had to point this out to me, was, for instance, the suggested structure of the component in terms of putting the script at the top instead of the template at the top.
And
that was one of the things he had changed. And I saw that. I said, did I miss something here? He said, yeah, you did. That's sort of the suggested. Pointed me to the Vue docs. I was like, oh, okay, good to know. I'm glad. Glad we did that. So yeah, that makes it more fun to be doing a course while the ground underneath you is changing.
Yeah, that's always a fun when it's a moving target of like obviously it's our intention to release content as soon as it's relevant. You know, like if we waited until the official release of something to start producing the
Right.
content on it, then it'd be too late. So, fortunately and unfortunately, the way that we work is to try to get ahead of it. But what that means is it's a moving target, and things could be slightly different in the beta version than the live version. So maybe you have to amend things just before you record it, or maybe we have to go back a few weeks after the official release and then release our updated version of the course. But it's our intention to be of most benefit to our users in a timely fashion, and so that's how we work. But I'm glad that you had that kind of that experience of learning as you were teaching, and I find that's the best way that I found to learn anything is if I know I've got to explain it in a way where potentially millions of people are going to like have that aha moment, then I've got to really clearly understand this in a way that I can say it as clearly as possible.
Yes, for sure. That's always a nice little incentive. Am I going to look like an idiot, or am I going to look
Right?
good?
Yeah. Are people going to question my competence or no?
Right, for sure. All right. So before we move on to picks, anything else you wanted to cover that we haven't delved into yet?
I think we can move into picks.
All right. So I will go first and let the guests go last. My usual week ending of these podcasts is with the dad jokes. So today will be no different. Got to dig through my list here. So New Year's coming up. A lot of people do New Year's resolutions. And so what I've decided this year is I'm going to open a gym. A lot of people want to exercise, right, and get into shape.
Yep.
I exercise quite a bit, just to keep into shape. Otherwise, I'd look like a giant marshmallow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a gym called Resolutions. So it'll have exercise equipment for the first 2 weeks, and then it turns into a wine bar for the rest of the year. Right? Because that's the way resolutions usually go. You hear the jokes about, somebody walks into a bar and such happens. So a skunk, a deer, and a duck went out to dinner. But when it came time to pay, the skunk didn't have a cent, the deer didn't have a buck, and so they put it on the duck's bill.
Cringing over here, Steve.
Yes, you're laughing too. I can hear it. It's funny. There, back in when I was in high school, back in the 80s, there was these shirts that were duck shirts, and they had all these duck puns about Mallard adjusted and so on. I loved them. And I had one that said, just another bill, it shows a duck paying a bill or something like that.
Yeah.
I wish I still had it. It was so good. And then, we always talk about developers having side gigs. And so I started a school, speaking of schools, Vue Mastery, where I was going to teach people the art of clairvoyance. But unfortunately, it was shut down due to unforeseen circumstances. Right? It's like the time I went to see a clairvoyant, a fortune teller, and I knocked on the door and she said, "Who is it?" And so I left. She doesn't know who I am. How she's going to be able to help me?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So anyway, those are the dad jokes of the week. What do you got for us, Adam, in terms of picks?
What do I got? So my picks, so non-tech related, I am definitely on the White Lotus bandwagon. I'm not sure if you've seen that or heard of that.
Somebody was starting in our company Slack. Somebody started a channel specifically devoted to the White Lotus, and I was like, "What the? I don't even know what it is yet."
Yeah, it just concluded its second season. I haven't finished the final episodes, but it's basically a mystery. It's kind of almost like Clue, like whodunit type thing. And that, and this is not a spoiler, but like in the beginning of each season, you realize that someone has died, but you don't know who, you don't know how, and then throughout the course of the season, they kind of like build up. It's really excellently written, where it could be anyone, who is a killer or is the victim, and you don't know until the very last moment. So it's just really good writing, and it's got humor in it. Jennifer Coolidge is excellent in it, and so that would be my top non-tech pick. But I also have a tech pick called Vue Fire. Have you heard of this?
Vue Fire, I have not.
This is one of the newer projects that Eduardo San Martin Morote is working on. So he built, for those of you not aware, he built Vue Router as well as Pinia. So he also has been working on, and it'll officially be released soon, maybe by the time some of you hear this. So Vue Fire is essentially a collection of composables that helps us use Firebase in our Vue apps. So we're really excited about having a kind of post-va approved and designed way to use Firebase, and I'm sure it's going to be an excellent tool, just like Pinia and just like Vue Router is. He has a very brilliant mind, and one of my favorites in the Vue ecosystem. So I'm happy that he has this new tool under his belt for us all to use. We're actually working on a course on Firebase and using Vue.use. So it's going to be a Firebase Foundations course that we're releasing in the coming weeks. And so yeah, you'll learn all about this tool. And I also wanted to plug, that'll be a prerequisite for, we're working on more Nux content. So we've got Steve's Nux 3 Essentials. We've got Ben Hong, who is a Nux ambassador. He built a course on how to create a blog with Nux 3's content module, which is a nice way to build a content-driven app. And he's working on a full stack Nux 3 course where we're going to really focus on intersectionality, where we're combining Nux 3 with Firebase using the Vue Fire, and also styling it with Vuetify and throwing in some composables. So really baking the cake with a lot of those intersecting technologies that a lot of the Vue pros want to use together.
So Vue Fire is sort of like Mongoose is for Mongo with Node type of thing, where it's just sort of like an SDK where it gives you ways to plug in and it does all the dirty work communicating with Firebase.
Yeah, via like elegant composables is my understanding.
Oh, okay. Definitely Vue 3 then, for sure.
Yep, for sure.
Excellent. All right. Well, I've got those noted down, and we will throw those into the show notes.
Awesome.
So if people want to get hold of you or give you more money just for free, or anything like that, obviously we know Vue Mastery. Follow you on Twitter, or where else can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can follow me at Adam Jahr, that's Jahr, on Twitter, as well as, check us out on YouTube with our Vue Mastery channel. You can subscribe and watch all of the free content that we publish there. And also, of course, the heart of everything is at viewmastery.com, where all of the free stuff lives, in addition to all of the conference videos, as well as all of the current and existing courses on all the topics you need to be the best Vue developer you can possibly be.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for coming, Adam. This has been a lot of fun. Been looking forward to this one for a while. Like you said, if you want to check out some amazing Vue videos, go to viewmastery.com. And if you want a dad joke 5 days a week, you can follow me at Wonder95 on Twitter. And with that, we will wrap it up. Thank you for coming, Adam, and we will talk at you all next time.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Thanks for listening.